Hey there, welcome. I'm here to help you relax tonight. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It really makes us feel like the global community it is. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our evening together. Story 7. His Perfect Doll. Julian didn't court me. He curated me. Our meeting wasn't chance. It was an acquisition. He saw me across the gallery, a young art restorer, painstakingly reviving a damaged portrait, and he later told me he knew I was a neglected masterpiece, waiting for the right collector to appreciate my true value. His love was a gilded cage from the very beginning. He praised my talent, but only when it aligned with his taste. "Your own work is so unstructured, my darling," he'd say, his voice a silken knife. "But your skill in restoring true art, that is your gift." He moved me into his penthouse, a minimalist masterpiece of glass and steel with panoramic views of the city. It was stunning, sterile, and felt like a museum. My museum. He began with small refinements. "That shade of lipstick is too vulgar for your complexion, my dear. Wear this one." He'd replace my comfortable clothes with elegant, tailored outfits he selected. "I want the world to see the treasure I have." It felt flattering at first. He was so sophisticated, so sure. I felt unpolished, clumsy next to him. His corrections felt like love. Then the rules began. Rule 1. No friends from my previous life. "They were a bad influence," he said. "They didn't understand our connection." Rule 2. My phone was to be available for his inspection at any time. Trust was paramount, and transparency was the foundation of trust. Rule 3. I was to be home by 7 each evening. He disliked eating alone. I was lonely, but he filled every moment with his presence. Dinners at exquisite restaurants where he'd order for me. Weekends at his estate where he'd watch me paint, but only the classical pieces he provided for restoration. My world shrank to the size of his approval. The first time I disagreed, I wanted to visit my sick mother. His reaction was not anger. It was a profound, wounded disappointment. "After all I've given you," he whispered, his face a mask of pain. "I've built this perfect world for us, and you want to leave it for that?" He made me feel so selfish, so ungrateful. I canceled the trip. The relief on his face was my reward. The isolation was complete. My family thought I'd changed, become a snob. My old friends stopped calling. Julian was my entire universe. His love was the air I breathed, and he controlled the supply. The change happened after a charity gala. A man, a fellow artist, had complimented my work on a restored piece. We'd spoken for a few minutes about technique. Julian had been charming, gracious. But in the car home, the air turned to ice. "You were flirting with him," he said, his voice quiet and flat. "What?" "No, Julian, we were just talking about art. You smiled at him the way you used to smile at me." He pulled the car over and looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the cold, hard thing beneath the polished surface. "I won't share my collection." That night, he installed a new lock on the penthouse door. A keypad lock. He programmed the code in front of me. "For your safety, my love," he said, kissing my forehead. "The world is full of people who wouldn't understand what we have." He didn't give me the code. The penthouse became my gilded prison. I couldn't leave without him. He worked from home more, his study just down the hall, the door always slightly ajar. Watching, he started a new project. He called it Perfection. He began photographing me. Not candid shots, but portraits. He'd pose me by the window, on the white sofa, my head tilted at a specific angle. "Hold still, my darling." "Perfect. You are so perfect." The photos weren't displayed. He stored them on a private server. I once glimpsed the screen. It wasn't a gallery of images. It was a grid. Dozens of photos of me, each tagged with metadata. Angle _ 12 _ lighting _ 7B _ expression _ submissive _ 04. I wasn't his fiancé. I was his subject, his specimen. The final piece of his collection arrived one afternoon in a large, flat crate. He opened it with the reverence of a priest unveiling a relic. Inside was a life-size doll. Its face was a blank, smooth oval of polished porcelain. It was wearing one of my dresses. "It's a mannequin, my love," he said, his eyes gleaming with a strange light. "For the final stage. So I can perfect the lighting, the composition, before we involve you. I don't want you to get tired." He placed the doll in the living room. It stood in the corner, a silent, faceless twin. I had to walk past it every day. Julian would sometimes sit and just look at it, then at me, making tiny adjustments to its pose, murmuring to himself. I started having nightmares of the doll moving, its blank face developing a mouth that screamed silently. I'd wake up sweating, and the first thing I'd see was its silhouette in the moonlight from the window. I was cracking. The constant scrutiny, the isolation, the terrifying, silent doll, it was breaking my mind. I knew, with a cold certainty, that perfection had an end date. And I didn't know what happened to exhibits after the curator was done with them. I had to get out. I had to remember the code. I started watching him more closely than he watched me. I noted the way his fingers moved on the keypad. He was meticulous, but he was also arrogant. He never thought I was a threat. He thought I was broken. I saw the sequence. 0-9-0-1. The date of the gala where he decided I was his. His anniversary of ownership. I waited for my chance. It came when he received an urgent business call, his voice sharp and angry. He retreated into his study, slamming the door shut, fully engrossed. Now, my heart hammered against my ribs. I crept to the door, my hand trembling. I punched in the numbers. 0901. A soft, electric beep. A green light. The lock disengaged. I pulled the door open and stepped out into the hallway. I was free. I didn't take the elevator. I ran down 20 flights of stairs, my breath sobbing in my chest. I burst out into the cool evening air and just ran. I didn't stop until I was miles away, surrounded by the noise and chaos of the city I'd been stolen from. I found a payphone. My phone was still in the penthouse, a tracking device he'd given me, and called the only person I could think of, my older sister, Claire. The one I'd pushed away when Julian told me she was jealous of our happiness. She answered on the first ring. "Hello, Claire." I choked out, tears streaming down my face. "It's me. I need help." There was a pause. Then, her voice, cold and flat. "I'm sorry. You must have the wrong number." The line went dead. I stood there, the receiver clutched in my hand, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. She didn't believe me. Or worse, he'd gotten to her first. Told her I was unstable. A liar. I was alone. A sleek, black car I recognized pulled up to the curb. The passenger window slid down. Julian sat in the driver's seat. He wasn't angry. He looked sad, disappointed. "Get in the car, my love," he said, his voice gentle. "You've had a fright. Let's go home." He'd known. He'd probably known the moment I'd opened the door. The code, my escape, it was all just another test. And I had failed. The fight drained out of me. There was no escape. He was the world. I got in the car. He didn't speak during the drive. He just reached over and held my hand, his thumb stroking my skin. It made my flesh crawl. When we arrived back at the penthouse, the door was open. The doll was no longer in the corner. It was sitting on the sofa. In its hands, it held a small, familiar notebook. My old sketchbook. The one filled with my unstructured, passionate, messy own work. The work I thought I'd hidden. Julian led me to the sofa and sat me down next to the doll. He picked up the sketchbook. "I found this," he said softly, his voice laced with a terrible, wounded sadness. "After you left. You've been keeping secrets, my darling. Creating these things. After I asked you not to. This is the impurity. This is the sickness I need to cure." He tore a page from the book, a drawing of a wild, stormy sky I'd done from memory. He held it up. "This isn't you," he whispered. Then he lit a match and set the page on fire. He dropped it into a glass bowl on the table, watching it burn to ash. "This is the chaos I'm saving you from." He burned another page. And another. Each drawing, each piece of my soul, went up in flames. I sat there, numb, watching my old self be erased. When it was done, he knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. His eyes were full of tears, of love. "The final stage begins now, my perfect doll," he whispered. "Don't worry. I'll remove the parts that don't belong. And soon, you'll be flawless." He led me not to my room, but to his study. The door was wide open. Inside, next to his desk, was a dentist's chair. It was reclined. Straps hung from the arms and legs. And on a tray next to it, laid out on a sterile cloth, were tools. Not artist's tools. Surgical tools. The doll stood in the corner of the study, its blank face turned toward the chair. Its pose was exactly mine. The sight of the chair, the straps, the cold, gleaming tools. It shattered the numb trance I was in. This wasn't a metaphor anymore. This wasn't about burning sketches. The final stage was literal. He was going to cut the imperfection out of me. A primal survival instinct, one I thought he'd completely extinguished, roared back to life. I screamed and tried to wrench my hands from his grasp. Julian's face, a moment ago full of loving concern, hardened into a mask of cold efficiency. His grip on my wrists turned to iron. He was surprisingly strong. Now, he chided, his voice losing its silken quality, becoming clinical. The resistance is part of the process. It confirms the infection is deep, but we will cleanse it. He dragged me toward the chair. I kicked. I thrashed. I screamed until my throat was raw. The sound was swallowed by the soundproofed walls of the penthouse. No one could hear me. No one was coming. He forced me into the chair. The leather was cold against my skin. He strapped my wrists down first, then my ankles. The restraints were thick, padded, professional. He'd planned this meticulously. I was trapped. Utterly. Completely. He stood over me, looking down at me with that same, terrifying blend of love and madness. "This is for you," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. "All for you. When you wake up, you'll be pure. You'll be grateful." He turned to the tray of tools. He selected a syringe, filled it with a clear liquid from a small vial. A sedative. Panic gave me a final, desperate strength. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom anymore. I was fighting for my mind, my very self. "My mother knows." I blurted out, the lie coming to me in a flash of desperation. "She knows everything. I sent her a letter. If I disappear, she'll go to the police. She has the sketchbook. A copy." Julian froze, the syringe poised in his hand. His head tilted. The lie was ridiculous. My mother lived across the country and we barely spoke, but it introduced a variable he hadn't calculated. A loose end. His obsession with control couldn't abide a loose end. A war played out on his face. The urge to complete his work versus the paralyzing need to maintain absolute dominion. He slowly lowered the syringe. "A letter?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Yes," I sobbed, leaning into the lie. "I mailed it last week. She'll have it by now. She knows about you. About the doll. Everything." He stared at me for a long, terrifying minute, his eyes searching mine for the truth. I tried to project defiance, to hide the sheer terror that was liquefying my bones. Finally, he placed the syringe back on the tray. "A complication," he murmured to himself, turning away from me and pacing slowly in front of the doll. "An imperfection in the planning. It must be rectified." He stopped and looked at the doll, as if seeking its counsel. The source of the impurity must be addressed first. The external infection must be sterilized before the internal purification can begin. He walked back to me. He didn't pick up the syringe. Instead, he began to unstrap my ankles, then my wrists. My heart leaped with a wild, disbelieving hope. It had worked. "Get up," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. I stood on shaky legs, rubbing my sore wrists. Was he letting me go? "We are going to pay a visit to your mother," he said, his eyes glazing over with a new, frightening purpose. "We will retrieve the letter, and we will correct her understanding of our situation." My hope curdled into a new, deeper horror. I hadn't saved myself. I had just expanded the scope of his madness. I had dragged my mother into my nightmare. "No," I whispered. "Julian, please. She doesn't know anything." I lied. He smiled then, a thin, terrible smile. "Of course you did, my love. Lying is a symptom of the sickness. But we must be thorough. We will eliminate the possibility. We will cleanse that, too." He took my arm, his grip firm, and led me out of the study, past the silent, watching doll, and out of the penthouse. He was taking me with him. I was to be a witness to whatever cleansing he had planned for my mother. The car ride was silent. Julian drove, his focus absolute. I sat in the passenger seat, my mind racing. I had to warn her. I had to find a way. He took my phone from his pocket. He'd confiscated it when I'd gotten in the car and handed it to me. "Call her," he instructed, his voice calm. "Tell her you're coming for a surprise visit, that you're bringing your wonderful fiancé. Do not deviate. I will be listening." It was a test, a chance. My fingers trembled as I dialed my mother's number. She answered, surprised to hear from me. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking. I tried to pour every ounce of warning I could into my words. "Hi, I'm coming to visit. A surprise." I'm bringing Julian, my fiancé. The word tasted like ash. Oh, she said, her voice bright and unsuspecting. How wonderful. I can't wait to meet him. Mom, listen, I said, desperation clawing at my throat. It's so sudden. We're coming right now. We're in the car. It's a really long drive. Through the night. You should make sure the house is ready. Clean. Really clean. For guests. Please understand, I begged her silently. Please hear me. Get out. Lock the doors. Call the police. Of course, sweetie, she chirped. I'll tidy up. Drive safe. I'm so excited. She hadn't understood. Not at all. Julian took the phone from my hand and ended the call. He gave me a slow, approving nod. Good, he said. The bait is set. He saw my attempt at a warning not as betrayal, but as part of his own plan. He was so far inside his own madness that he could twist anything to fit. We drove through the night. Each mile was a countdown to a horror I had set in motion. I was no longer a prisoner being taken to her doom. I was the lure. The all-night drive was a descent into a special kind of hell. The hum of the engine was the only sound, a monotonous drone underscoring my terror. Julian didn't speak. He was perfectly calm, focused on the road, a man on a necessary errand. The worst part was the occasional, gentle smile he'd give me. A loving fiancé, taking his beloved to see her mother. The performance was for an audience of one, himself. I watched the landscape change from city lights to inky blackness to the first gray hints of dawn. My mind was a frantic, trapped bird, beating against the bars of my skull. I had to do something. When we stopped for gas, I tried to make eye contact with the cashier, trying to project a silent scream. But Julian was always there, his hand possessively on the small of my back, his smile charming and disarming. My fiancé is just exhausted, he'd explain, and they'd nod, seeing only a beautiful, tired couple. He was a master. He'd built this prison so well that even when the door was open, I didn't know how to run. The sun was fully up when we turned onto my mother's street. It was a quiet, middle-class neighborhood, still asleep. Her house looked small, vulnerable, the lawn neat, the curtains drawn. A place of normalcy that was about to be violated. Julian parked a few houses down. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment, studying the house. He wasn't seeing a home. He was seeing a problem to be solved. A source of impurity. Now, he said, turning to me. His eyes were bright, intense. We will be gracious guests. You will be happy to see her. You will be the perfect daughter. You will retrieve the letter. Once I have it, we will leave. There will be no mess if you do this correctly. Do you understand? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. No mess. The words were a promise and a threat. We walked to the door. My legs were leaden. Julian held my hand, his grip firm, a warning and a support. I rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door, her face wreathed in a sleepy smile. Lily, you're here. She pulled me into a hug. She felt small, warm, real. The scent of her laundry detergent and coffee was a painful stab of a life I'd lost. She pulled back and looked at Julian. And you must be the famous Julian. Oh my, you are handsome. Come in, come in. Julian turned on the charm. He was dazzling. He complimented her home, her garden, her daughter. He was the perfect son-in-law. I stood there, a frozen smile on my face, playing my part in his horrific play. We sat in the living room. She brought us coffee. Julian made pleasant small talk. I could see her falling for him completely. She was so happy for me. She had no idea the wolf was in her living room. The letter, darling. Julian prompted me gently, his eyes locking with mine. A silent command. My letter, my mother asked, confused. I wrote you a letter, Mom. I said, my voice trembling. Last week. Did you get it? I was trying to tell her again. Last week. I wasn't here last week. Her brow furrowed. A letter? No, honey, I didn't get any letter. Was it important? Julian's smile didn't falter, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. The confirmation that I had lied. The infection was confirmed. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his coffee. I must have forgotten to mail it. I whispered, my hope dying. Well, no matter, Julian said, setting his cup down with a quiet click. It was just Lily being sentimental. We can tell you all our news in person. He stood up. Lily, why don't you help your mother in the kitchen? I'd love to try one of her famous scones I've heard so much about. It was an order. He wanted me out of the room. My mother beamed, flattered. Oh, of course. Come on, Lily, they're just in the freezer. She led me into the kitchen, chattering happily. I followed, my heart hammering. I looked back. Julian wasn't sitting down. He was moving slowly around the living room, looking at photographs, picking up knickknacks. He was casing the house, looking for something, or just absorbing it, preparing it. In the kitchen, my mother busied herself with the oven. He's wonderful, Lily, she whispered. So sophisticated. You must be so happy. Mom, I said, my voice desperate low. You have to listen to me. He's not what he seems. He's dangerous. We need to leave. Now. She turned, a puzzled smile on her face. What? Oh, honey, are you nervous? Is it pre-wedding jitters? It's normal. No, it's not. I grabbed her arm. He locked me in his apartment. He has a doll that looks like me. He was going to. The kitchen doorway darkened. Julian stood there, leaning against the frame, holding a small, framed photo of me as a child. He was smiling. Is everything all right in here? He asked, his voice smooth as oil. My mother laughed, embarrassed. Oh, just girl talk. Lily's being silly. Julian's eyes met mine. The message was clear. See? She doesn't believe you. No one will. You are mine. He walked over and put his arm around me, pulling me close. His grip was painfully tight. My Lily is a warrior, he said to my mother. It's one of the things I love about her. But she's safe with me. I would never let anything happen to her. He was so convincing. My mother's face softened. She believed him completely. The oven timer dinged. Scones are ready, she trilled. Julian led me back to the living room. Sit, he commanded softly, pushing me onto the sofa. He sat next to me, his body angled toward mine, a cage of attentive love. My mother came in with a plate of scones. She was so proud, so happy. Julian took one. He didn't eat it. He held it, examining it. It looks perfect, he said. Just like your daughter. He looked at my mother. You did a wonderful job with her. But now, he said, his voice dropping, losing its pleasantry, becoming cold and hard, she's mine. And you've become a complication. The smile froze on my mother's face. The plate trembled in her hands. I don't understand. The letter was a lie, Julian said, standing up. He placed the uneaten scone back on the plate with deliberate care. But the sentiment wasn't. Lily is impure, and you are the source. A clinging, provincial influence. A bad memory I need to erase. He took a step toward her. My mother backed away, her eyes wide with dawning horror. She was finally seeing the monster behind the mask. Julian, no. I cried, trying to stand up. He turned and pointed a finger at me. Sit. Stay. This is part of your treatment. Witnessing the removal of the infection. He turned back to my mother. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He didn't need one. His presence, his utter certainty, was weapon enough. Please, my mother whispered, her back against the wall. Leave us alone. This will be quick, Julian said, his voice chillingly matter-of-fact. If you cooperate. Where are your financial documents? Your will? We need to make this look like an accident. A fall. A broken neck. So sad. Lily will be so distraught. She'll need me to handle everything. He was going to kill her, and he was going to make me watch. And then he was going to use her death to bind me to him even tighter, the grieving fiancé consoling the heartbroken daughter. It was perfect. It was monstrous, and it was about to happen. The air in the room thickened, charged with a terrible, silent scream. My mother's face was a mask of pure, uncomprehending terror. Julian took another step toward her, his hand outstretched not in violence, but in a grotesque parody of an offer to help. The documents, he repeated, his voice patient, as if speaking to a slow child. Let's not make this difficult. My body was frozen, trapped on the sofa by his command, and by a terror so complete it felt like paralysis. This was my fault. I had led him here. To her. My mother's eyes darted from Julian's advancing form to me, pleading, confused. Then they landed on the mantelpiece behind me, on a heavy, crystal candlestick holder. A spark of something, not hope, but a desperate, feral will to fight, ignited in her eyes. It was a look I remembered from my childhood, when she'd faced down a stray dog that had cornered me. A mother's fury. Julian saw the shift in her expression. A faint, condescending smile touched his lips. There's no need for that, he said softly. It's already over. In that moment, something in me broke open. Not the numb, broken thing he had created, but the old me. The girl who drew stormy skies. The girl who fought back. The impurity, He was so desperate to erase. I didn't think. I moved. As Julian took his final step toward my cowering mother, I launched myself off the sofa, not at him, but at the mantelpiece. My hand closed around the cold, heavy crystal of the candlestick. It was far heavier than I expected. The movement was clumsy, desperate. Julian turned, his eyes widening not with fear, but with a kind of incredulous disappointment. "Lily," he sighed, as if chastising a misbehaving pet. I swung the candlestick. It wasn't a graceful arc. It was a wild, panicked blow. I wasn't aiming for his head. I was aiming for the threat, the monster. The heavy base of the candlestick connected with the side of his knee. The sound was a sickening, wet crunch, entirely different from the thud I expected. Julian let out a sharp, startled gasp. Not a scream of pain, but a sound of profound surprise, as if the universe had just violated a fundamental law. His leg buckled. He went down hard on one knee, his face pale with shock. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, not with anger, with a kind of betrayed, heartbroken confusion. You damaged me," he whispered. The clinical part of my mind, the restorer, noted the damage. The kneecap was likely shattered. The injury was severe, debilitating. The human part of me saw only my chance. "Mom, run!" I screamed, my voice raw. My mother didn't need telling twice. She scrambled past the kneeling Julian, who was staring at his leg as if it belonged to someone else. She grabbed my arm, and we ran. We burst out the front door into the bright, shocking normality of the morning. We didn't stop. We ran down the street, past the neat lawns and silent houses, 2 women in flight, not looking back. We didn't have a plan. We just ran. We reached a main road, gasping for breath. I flagged down a passing car, a man in a pickup truck on his way to work. I must have looked insane, wild-eyed, disheveled. "Please," I begged. "Call the police. My fiancé. He's back there. He tried to kill us." The man took one look at our faces, at the sheer, undiluted terror, and didn't hesitate. He shoved his phone at us. "Get in." We climbed into the truck. As he dialed 911, I looked back toward my mother's house. There was no sign of pursuit. Julian was still inside, with his shattered knee and his shattered perfect world. The police came. We told them everything. The isolation, the control, the doll, the chair, the tools, the threats. It sounded insane, but my mother was a credible witness, and my wrists were bruised from the restraints. And when they went to the house, they found Julian. He hadn't tried to flee. He was sitting on the living room floor, cradling his leg, surrounded by the cozy normality of my mother's home. He looked up at the officers, his face a mask of calm, superior pain. "Officers," he said, his voice strained but still dripping with condescension. "Thank goodness. There's been a terrible accident. My fiancée, she's unstable. She has episodes. She became violent. I was trying to get her help. She attacked me and her poor mother. You must find them. They need help." He was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to frame the world to his design. But this time he failed. They saw the tools in his car. They found the photos on his server, the metadata tags. They listened to my mother's tearful account of his threats. The perfect story he'd constructed had too many cracks. The evidence of his obsession was too vast, too meticulous to be dismissed as my instability. He was arrested, charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault, and attempted murder. I got a restraining order. I changed my name. Again, I moved with my mother to a new state, a small town where nobody knew us. The nightmares are constant. I dream of the doll, its blank face now wearing Julian's smiling mouth. I dream of the chair, the straps, the cold touch of the tools. Sometimes, I wake up and for a moment, I don't know where I am. I feel the ghost of his control, the phantom weight of his expectations. I have to touch the scars on my wrists, feel the solid door of my own bedroom that has no lock, to remind myself that I'm free. The law can keep him in a cage, but I know a part of him is still with me. The curator is gone, but the exhibition he made of my life is forever etched into my soul. I am his masterpiece of fear, and I am learning to live with the canvas he left behind. The trial was a media sensation. The doll maker, they called him. His defense was a masterpiece of manipulation, portraying himself as a misunderstood artist, a passionate man driven to extremes by his love for a troubled woman. He spoke of my artistic temperament, my fragile mental state. He was calm, articulate, and terrifyingly persuasive. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury saw the photos. They heard the testimony of the one old friend I managed to track down who testified about my sudden isolation. They saw the blueprints on his computer for a soundproofed studio in his new country home, a room with drainage in the floor. They found the mannequin. When the police had first searched the penthouse, it was gone. He'd had someone move it. But they found it later, in a storage unit rented under a false name. It was no longer blank. He'd been working on it in his cell, using materials his somehow still loyal lawyer brought him. He had given it a face. My face. Rendered in exquisite, lifelike detail. But the expression was wrong. It was a vacant, placid smile. The eyes were glassy and empty. It was his vision of perfection. It was the woman he had intended to leave that apartment with. The sight of it in the courtroom made me vomit. He was convicted on all counts. The sentence was long. He showed no emotion when it was read. He just looked at me, across the courtroom, and gave a slow, deliberate nod. It wasn't a nod of defeat. It was a nod of acknowledgement, as if we were partners in a story that was simply taking an unexpected pause. That was 5 years ago. My mother and I live quietly. I don't restore art anymore. I can't bear to touch something someone else has created, to be a vessel for another's vision. I work at a library. The quiet order soothes me. I am learning to draw again. My own things. Messy, chaotic, imperfect things. They are mine. I still jump at shadows. I change my routines constantly. I check my locks 3 times every night. I know his money, his influence, his network might still be out there. His collector of friends who understood his passion. The fear is a low-grade fever, always there. I received a letter last week. It was forwarded from my old post office box. The handwriting was precise, familiar. It was from him. I almost burned it. But I had to know. I had to face it. I opened it. There was no plea, no apology, no threats. It was a single, typewritten line. The composition is never truly finished. I am just waiting for the light to change. I didn't show it to the police. What would they do? It was just a sentence. A thought. But I know what it means. He is patient. He is eternal. The world is his gallery, and I am still his most prized piece. He believes that one day, the conditions will be right. The light will be perfect, and he will finish his work. I keep the letter in a drawer. It is my reminder, not of him, but of me. I am not his doll. I am the one who swung the candlestick. I am the one who broke the composition. I am the flaw in his perfect world, and I will keep being that flaw. Every messy, chaotic, imperfect day, the light will never be right for him again, because I am the one who controls the light now.